Now, I know you're probably noticing I got a different camera angle. That's because I found myself not being able to be super consistent with my videos, especially when it comes to ADHD. So now I have it here in my car and I drive a lot each day. So the hope is that I can make a lot more consistent videos doing something like this. What I wanted to share today was something that I've been researching recently when it comes to adult ADHD, and it's pretty like science-based, so I don't want to use a lot of that language. But what I will say is that it's vastly important, especially when it comes to, you know, those periods that you have of saying like, there's that one thing I really want to do. I just can't do it. I want to do it, but I can't. I have every single idea, every single aspect, picture perfect in my head. I just can't do it. So there's this little thing in the brain called the default mode network. I would highly encourage to Google that. And inside that network is this process that happens when your brain is in a resting state. It's a state where you can like rest. It's a state where it's like your baseline. You're not too high, not too low. It's your default. Now, in neurotypical brains, normal brains, this default mode network works the way that it should, in an optimal way. But for good old ADHD, here comes. It's not optimized that way. Our brains are built in differently, so we look through this world through a different lens. So our default mode network is kind of on overdrive. You constantly wonder, why am I up all the time? Why do I have constant energy or hyper focused on this thing, especially when I want to go to sleep, just as one example. A portion of that is due to the default mode network not being in the chill mode. It's just constantly on. So you're probably wondering, how can I get my default mode network from overactive to kind of optimal? And I have a simple response to that. And that is the one thing that I started doing years ago when I was in graduate school, when I struggled to have more focus on anything, because the default mode network for us is just we're wandering everywhere. And that was to be present. And let me actually give you a full breakdown of what that means. And what I mean by that is to be actively present, real present, not to just shrug off and say, I'm present. No, it's a lot more than that. So to be present is to find a bench, walk over to it, sit down, breathe, close your eyes if you're comfortable, and simply notice what's going on. The weather, the wind, the temperature, your skin, the heat on your skin, how cold your skin is, the weather hitting your skin. Pretend there's like a point of view camera kind of like wrapped inside of you, but all around you. You're able to see like above yourself, below yourself, soles of your feet at the bottom of the ground. You notice your heartbeat, your breathing. This is kind of just the noticing mode. And believe it or not, this is you forcing yourself into that default mode network mode. The mode that people are in by average. So the cool part about this is that you can kind of manifest this. This is in and out of the clinical literature too, which is pretty cool. So another word for this is called mindfulness, where you are mindful for the moment in a non-judgmental presence and doing your very best to just be. No intense rules, you're just being. So I hope that can then give you an idea of what happens next, which is your default mode network is underactive, which then, when you're in that state for a little bit, something else happens, which is called the task positive network. And so think of yourself calming down, stable mind. And the cool part is that rather than being wandering everywhere, you're able to be very specific now. Now that you're at that default state, now your mind can be. And when your mind is in that range where you can just be, it doesn't need to be anywhere else, just in the moment by moment. So the default network is on. Your brain essentially assimilates and matches to what a neurotypical brain would experience, which is the norm of just being. And now you might notice a few things. What I noticed is when I was able to like be in that presence, I had to use a mechanism in order to keep myself in that, because it wasn't enough to just say, all right, I'm just gonna be. I had to actively be doing something too. I'm sure you could relate. So all I did was practice some actual breathing techniques, correct breathing techniques. If you didn't know, if you breathe with your shoulders or your chest or your neck, you're actually putting more strain on your mental capacity for coping. It's actually working backwards. You're putting more stress in those areas, which is well known for holding things like heavier emotions, or secondary emotions like anger. But when you breathe effectively, you fill your belly with air as if there's a balloon in there. And what I want to highlight is that when you breathe into your nose, out of your nose, there's a lot of science behind that one, but when you do that, you are now really regulating yourself to be in that default mode network state. So now you're not only relaxed, but your brain is shifting to something which is hard to do, which is focus, because the mechanisms are starting to come into play. So here's what you've been waiting for. Now what? That's when you can tap into this thing called the task positive network, which is your brain's way of saying, what can I then do? And the answer is you return to the thing that you've been wanting to do. So in my case, I do a lot of writing. I have a pay what you want e-library of ebooks, working on a couple other things, one thing at a time. And in order for me to actually commit and to do that, I have to put myself in this mind state of the default mode network. At least it's working as far as I can tell. So I do my mindfulness, default mode network is on, I'm breathing, stabilizing myself. And then from there, believe it or not, I'm able to actually identify what I want to do, and I can do it. And I keep it small because I want to be realistic too. So I tell myself I'm going to open up Google Docs, and that's all I'm going to do is just open up Google Docs. And it's a lot easier. It just, for some reason it is. Not for some reason, it's this whole mindfulness process of getting your brain back into that network. And then I open up Google Doc and I'm like, that wasn't too bad. And then I type out a few statements, and that wasn't too bad either. Then I type more and more and more, and obviously it's getting bad. But I'm in it now. Like I'm in that network of moving forward, knowing that it's like pushing a boulder uphill. You can't stand it sometimes, yet you're doing it. And that was the purpose of this video today. It's kind of to just share that. And yeah, it's something I do daily. And yes, it's working. And the cool part is it gets easier to recognize that when I'm in that scattered state of an overactive network, that's like my cue to take a step back and acknowledge this is when I can practice presence again. I go right back into the routine that I'm aware of because I got pretty good at it, and it works. I just finished a 83-page ebook on thriving in college with ADHD, something I wish that I had. My apologies that it's 83 pages. I don't expect or suspect anyone can get through it. Just skip to the chapter. They're labeled. It's free. I have a link on my page, and there's a bunch of other stuff, ebooks on there too. So they're free, or pay what you want. But yeah, first video in the car, success, it's done. And I practiced my presence, mindfulness state before I even jumped in and did this video. So hopefully it felt focused. Hopefully you were able to catch on, and hopefully the edits that you saw were helpful enough to learn about the default mode network, learn about the task positive network, and managing it to the best of your ability. Take care.